So launching a new e-commerce store is really exciting, but one of the biggest decisions you'll have to make is how to get your website up and running. I'm going to share with you some top tips that you'll have to consider when you start to set up your online store. So for the best advice on how to grow your e-commerce brand quickly and profitably, subscribe to my channel, hit the like button and the bell as well, and then you'll be notified every week when I launch a new video. So I'm Sarah, I'm founder of the Fastnet agency, and we help ambitious up-and-coming brands to scale their online stores through digital marketing. Getting your e-commerce store up and running can be a really stressful time, and there are a number of different elements that you'll want to consider as you start to get your store up and running. So I'm going to cover the real key components that you need to have in mind when you're looking at building your online store. So this will include how to choose your developer, if you're going to use a developer to build your online store, what sort of features you need to incorporate, and how you're going to promote your online store once you're ready for launch. Okay, so there are several different technical elements that you'll need to consider before you get your online store up and running. So I'm going to run through these very quickly with you. You can do a bit more research online, but these are the kind of bullet points of the things that you need to be able to consider. So the first thing is your domain registration. So your domain really is the domain you use for your website, your URL. So if you want it to be mystore.com, then the mystore.com is your domain. Now you can use a domain provider to get this up and running. There are a number of different domain providers out there, one.com, 123reg, GoDaddy, but you'll need to go to them and register the domain that you want. You'll be able to search and see what domains are available. We quite often recommend, if you're going to go, for example, for a .com domain and you're based in the UK, also trying to register the .co.uk domain as well, or vice versa. That just means that it stops anybody really setting up with an almost identical domain name and setting up a very similar brand that could potentially jeopardize your own store. Registering a domain is really simple. You just literally go onto the website, you can search what is available, you select the domains that you want to register, and then you go through and you just follow the payment process. It's not particularly expensive. Most domain providers will allow you to register a domain for like £20 or so. Sometimes domains that are particularly sought after can fetch large sums of money, but most of the time you're only talking about maybe 20, 30, 40 pounds to register your domain for a year. So once you've got your domain set up, you know what your online store, what the web address is going to be, then the next thing to consider is your hosting. Now hosting really is the server, the computer somewhere that stores all of the files for your website, which allows your website to be accessible when you go to your domain name. Now there are a number of different hosting providers out there, and it will partly depend on which provider, e-commerce provider you choose to use. Now if you choose to use something like WooCommerce, that's a self-hosted platform. That means that you've got to get your own hosting up and running to host those files, so you'll need to have a little look at who you want to use for your hosting. If you choose to use something like Shopify provide the hosting for you. They're a kind of ready-made service, so that isn't really something you're going to have to worry about. If you choose to go with Shopify, they will sort out the hosting on your behalf. Leading on from that, what e-commerce platform are you going to use? The two most popular platforms are Shopify and WooCommerce. I made a video over here which goes through that in great detail, but there are a number of different providers as well out there for you to choose from. So the final thing you're going to have to consider is your payment gateway. Now your payment gateway is a provider that allows you to take payments online, and there are a number of different ones. So some of the biggest ones are PayPal. We've all heard of PayPal, I'm sure. Stripe is another really popular one that has some really good options in terms of integrating it into your website. Shopify actually has its own payment gateway that you can choose to use if you want to. There's WorldPay, there's SagePay, there's a multitude of different payment gateways that you can use. But yeah, definitely, I would say in my experience, the most popular are PayPal and Stripe. So if you're looking for a really simple integration, those are the two predominant ones to look at. So tell me, do you run an e-commerce store? What are the things that you came across when it came to getting your store up and running? I'd love to hear about your experiences. Just pop a comment in the box below and let's get the conversation going. Okay, so the first thing that you might be looking at if you're looking to build your online store is a web developer. Now, if you're not particularly tech savvy or you don't have the time, and this isn't something that you're going to look to do, then you are going to look to potentially find somebody to build your online store for you. Now, there's two key elements to this that I'd really highlight. The first is that web developers aren't necessarily web designers. So some people do both, and that's absolutely fine, but you just need to be really clear about whether the person you're employing is a designer or a developer, or whether they have overlapping skills. When you're looking at which designer or developer to use, it's really useful to be able to get an idea of what they've done in the past. So definitely ask for a history of the different sites they've built, and maybe get them to give you a rundown on the choices that they made when building those sites. Did they design them in a specific way for a specific reason? Is there unique functionality? Did they work with the client to create particular solutions? Try and get them to give you a rundown of what they've done behind those sites. So don't just look at the websites themselves, try and get the designer or the developer to talk you through their thought process there and how they managed the project. Now, particularly if you're using a third-party hosting solution, so say you go for WooCommerce and you're looking to host that platform yourself, you're going to want to make sure that your developer has good security and hosting solutions for you, unless you're looking to self-host. So making sure that they've got good backup systems, so if something goes wrong, there's a backup of your website, making sure that they've got good security features to stop your site from being hacked. Now, we are increasingly seeing sites, unfortunately, being hacked. We think it's a little bit of a knock-on effect from the pandemic. So it's really important to make sure that you've got good security systems in place to try and prevent that as much as possible. And in the awful case that does happen, that you've got good ways of getting that website back up and running quickly and efficiently. So quiz your developer on that, make sure that they've got some good answers for you there. Now, a really important element of this, and one that a lot of people forget, is that whoever builds your site for you has got to be willing and able to train you and your team on how to use that site. You know, you've got to be able to process orders, you've got to be able to reply to customer comments, you've got to be able to do a number of things in the back end of that website. So it's really important that you understand how your website works, at least from a functionality perspective. So make sure that your developer is really willing at the end of the project to sit down with you and talk through how you and your team are going to manage this site on a day-to-day basis. And finally, and a really important one here, because we've actually got a client that's going through this problem at the moment, is make sure you're really clear about who owns the IP, the intellectual property for your website. You don't want to have to be committed to one developer for the rest of your website's life. You know, it might well be that they move on or you move on, or there's maybe some kind of conflict that comes up, or just purely you want to take your site to the next level and you found somebody better. Either way, you want to have the flexibility to be able to move on and find different developers in the future. You don't want to have to be tied to the same developer forever. And one of the things that could be problematic in that instance is if they feel they own the IP or the intellectual property of your website. Now, personally, as an agency, we've always thought it was very fair and reasonable that if you've paid us to do something and we've produced that on your behalf and you've paid your bill, that intellectual property then automatically goes to you upon payment of your final invoice. But not every agency does this, and not every web developer does this. So make sure that when you're signing those contracts, you're clear about who will own the intellectual property for that site once the site is completed. Okay, so what sort of features are you going to want to incorporate into your e-commerce store? Now, obviously, this will be unique for every business. You might have certain bespoke functionality that you need specifically because of the type of products that you sell. But there are certainly some features that we'd really recommend everybody incorporating into their site in order to make the most of their marketing in the longer term. So the first one is the ability to create packages and cross-sells and upsells. Now, this is really important for raising your average order value at the checkout and therefore making your site more profitable. If you imagine if you're running adverts, it will cost you a certain amount to acquire a customer every time. So once you've acquired that customer, you want to make sure that they spend as much as possible at the checkout in order to get the maximum return on your investment. And cross-sells, upsells, packages are a great way of doing that. So if somebody's come to your site for one specific item, you can then sell complementary items that build into a package. They maybe get some sort of discount if they buy several things all together. That pushes up your average order value at the checkout. Again, makes your marketing more profitable. So make sure that you've got a clear plan of how you're going to do that. You'll notice Amazon do it all the time. You go into one product and they say, you know, customers often buy these things together, and they'll suggest other useful things that could complement that product. Sometimes you see on websites that when you go to the checkout process, you get an option of buying something else for a discounted price if you add it to the cart there and then. There are lots of different ways of doing it, but make sure you've considered this. Now, another really important thing to consider is the user flow from somebody landing on your site to adding something into their cart to going to the checkout. If that is complicated or clunky, or it's not 100% clear how they go about things, then that will mean that you lose people as part of that flow. So they come in, they're willing to buy, they add something to their cart, and then they disappear because the process is too complicated. So really important to make sure that as part of the features and functionality of the site, you've created a really smooth, easy, slick and quick user journey from adding the product to their basket to checking out and everything in between. Now, the other important thing, obviously, to remember on this is that doesn't only apply to desktop. Make sure it's just as easy on mobile. It's often more difficult on mobile to get this functionality to feel slick and to feel intuitive. So make sure that your developer's given really careful thought process to that to ensure that your website works just as well on mobile as it does on desktop. Now, a really important factor and one that you end up using all of the time in terms of promotion is coupon codes and potentially gift voucher codes as well. So they're two slightly different things, and I'll talk you through them. Coupon codes are where you've offered a special offer, maybe someone's won a competition, maybe you're doing a special offer for your email list or for your social media list, and you give them a specific code to pop in at the checkout, and that will give them a certain percentage off or maybe a free gift. So coupons are really important, and making sure that you've got some options as to how you use those coupons is a really good one. So for example, the free gift option or the buy one get one free option or the percentage discount option. Gift vouchers are another really great way of allowing people to use your store and introduce new people to your store. So slightly different from coupon codes. What someone does in this instance is they buy a gift voucher online for 20, 30, 40, 50 pounds, whatever the price amount may be. That provides a gift voucher code, which the person they're gifting that to can then enter in at the checkout of your website in order to use the gift voucher amount. Now you'll find by having both of those features incorporated into your site, it gives you much more flexibility in terms of growing the site, promoting the site, and introducing others to the website as well. Now, something that can be really useful, particularly for some products, things like clothing and apparel, various other types of products, can be an Instagram feed featuring your products. So when somebody tags the product in your Instagram, which they can do if you've set up an online shop with your products linked, you can then use those user-generated photos and images on the product pages to show your customers actually using your products. Now, this is a bit more of an advanced feature. It can take a little bit longer to set up, but it can be really, really effective, especially, as I say, with things like clothing, where people actually want to see what does it look like on real people, not just the models in your photographs. So having an Instagram feed which allows you to add additional images through Instagram to your product pages can be a really useful sales tool. Now, reviews will become one of the most important things that you can have in your online store. So it's really important that you've got that set up from the get-go. So it's important that, firstly, that users are able to just log in and quickly and easily leave a review. And also it's important that you've got a process for chasing reviews that doesn't involve you doing this manually. So when somebody checks out and buys a product, they then automatically get emailed asking to leave a review on a number of occasions until they go ahead and do that. You can create incentives for this. So leave a review and get a discount, leave a review and get a certain percentage off your next shop. So you can certainly incentivize it, but it's really important that there's an automated process for gathering those reviews, because people are quite often willing to do it. They just don't always think to do it themselves. So that's a really important factor. Now, there's various different ways you can incorporate this. WooCommerce and Shopify come with kind of built-in review systems in there, so you can just use the basic ones, or there's other third-party systems like Trustpilot that will allow you to integrate that into your site. They're a bit more sophisticated. They have slightly more sophisticated algorithms that allows you to tap into things like Google Shopping and stuff, but it can also be a little bit more expensive. So there are inbuilt functionality, relatively quick and easy and cheap to set up, of third-party systems, as I say, like Trustpilot, and another good one that we've used as well is Yotpo for gathering reviews and testimonials. Now, another really key feature that we always make sure is incorporated into the website is a good newsletter sign-up, normally as a pop-up when you go onto the site. I know pop-ups can be annoying, but they are still the most effective way of gathering newsletter sign-ups. And it's really important to try and link this to your abandoned cart system. So a good way of doing this is if somebody goes onto your website and you can tell by their IP address that the likelihood is they haven't come to your site before, you can do a newsletter pop-up which says, sign up to our newsletter today and get 10% off your first order. Really good incentive if somebody's wanting to buy from you to sign up to your newsletter. Once they've signed up, if they then add things to their cart but they don't check out, we know from their IP address who they are and what email address is linked to that user. So that then triggers an abandoned cart email sequence to say, you've got stuff sat in your cart, come and check out, and it reminds them to come back and buy from you again. So yeah, having a good newsletter sign up option linked to an abandoned cart sequence is really, really useful in terms of generating more sales. And finally, although we could go into numerous different ideas of what features you could have in your store, I'd say that the final one that I think is most important is having a really clear menu system if you have a lot of products. There's nothing worse than going onto a store and thinking, I want to buy this, I know exactly what I want, I just can't find it. Mega menus can be a really good way of doing this. These are the big menus that drop down from the top that have a number of of different columns with a number of different products featured. They can be a really nice way of enabling people to get really quickly to the products they want with just 1 or 2 clicks. Now remember, the more clicks somebody has to make, the more likely they are to bounce off your site without completing their purchase. So just think about that when you're designing your site. How can I get somebody to what they want with as fewer clicks as possible and as quickly as possible? And mega menus can be a great way of doing that. Okay, so let's run into the basics of how to promote your store. Now, I've gone into this in great detail in some of my other videos, so take a look at those. But I'm just going to run through a few of the key factors that you need to consider in this video, just so that you've got a basic understanding. So the first thing is make sure you install a really good SEO plugin. Now, if you're using something like Shopify or WooCommerce, you've got the ability to add additional plugins to your site which will give you better functionality, and investing in a really good SEO plugin is a must. Yoast for WooCommerce is a really good one. It's free. You can buy a premium level of it, but the basic free functionality in the free version is actually very, very good, and that will allow you to go through each of your pages and each of your products and add key word information and metadata, which will allow Google to more easily pick up and recognize the products that you're selling and move you up your Google rankings. Now, the nice thing about plugins like Yoast is even if you're not an SEO expert and you don't really know what you're doing, it will give you tips and advice per page of the sort of content you need to enter, and it gives you a really easy, effectively a form to fill in where you pop that information in there. So it kind of talks you through what you need to do step by step and allows you to optimize your site. Now, the most important thing with this is it's time consuming, and often if you pay another company to do this, the reason why it becomes so expensive is because it takes time to do, and that's really what you're paying for in addition to their expertise. So if you're setting up a new store and you're kind of, you know, time rich but money poor, then this is definitely something that you can do yourself. You can do it quite effectively, and it will save you quite a lot of investment in your marketing. Now, the second thing to do is to try and link your shop to Facebook and Instagram. Facebook and Instagram now have abilities to link your online stores so that you can feature your products. Instagram in particular is really useful because it then means that you can tag your products in photos, and that brings up a copy of the product in Instagram shops, which then links directly to your website. So make sure that you've got that set up so that people can really quickly and easily buy your products when they find them on your social media channels. Now, one of the quickest ways to get an e-commerce store up and running and generating sales is good Facebook advertising. Now, I did a whole video on this, which you're welcome to check out, but making sure that you've considered what sort of budget you're going to allocate to your Facebook and Instagram advertising is really important, because yes, certainly if you're looking to build quickly, you're going to have to invest some sort of budget into online advertising, and one of the easiest ways of doing this is through Facebook and Instagram advertising when you're looking to initially build your brand. Now, of course, remember, if this is something that you're doing in addition to having an actual physical store or premises, then there's nothing wrong with promoting your online store to your existing customers in your physical stores. So when somebody checks out and buys a gift, you know, put something into the bag which says, you know, check out our online store as well. Bear in mind that the fact that somebody's come in and bought from you in person doesn't mean that they won't like the convenience of buying online as well. So don't forget about your existing physical customers. There's a good chance that in addition to buying with you in store, they'll also look to buy online for convenience as well. Great way to promote a store, especially in the first instance as well, is competitions, giveaways, you know, making sure that you're sort of trying to build that audience by promoting your products, by running competitions. Now, I'm going to be doing a video next week all about how to run a really good, effective online marketing competition, so keep a lookout for that video if you'd like more information on that. And finally, a great way to launch your initial store and find an audience straight out of the bag is to look for Facebook groups. Now, people often forget that actually some of the best and most effective marketing can just be the marketing that you do with direct contact with individuals. There's loads of different groups out there that focus on different types. It might be that your products focus on, I don't know, horse riding or skiing, or maybe you know, health and beauty, and there'll be groups out there that focus on these topics, open groups on Facebook where people discuss the problems that they're having and solutions to those problems. And being able to find those groups, find those individuals and have conversations with them and suggest your products in a very subtle way as a solution to that problem can be a really good way of just starting to build a really good online audience, particularly if what you do is quite specialist. So thank you so much for watching. Now, one of the most important things when growing your online store is to really understand your niche. So I did a great video all about identifying your niche over here. And as we mentioned earlier, Facebook advertising can be a great way to start building your audience straight out of the bag when you've just launched your store. So I did a really in-depth video all about running your first Facebook adverts over here. Thanks so much for watching. Look forward to speaking to you next week.